In the shade.
Yeah, or hang out in the shade. The shade's fine too, I know. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started here, and we want a little bit of sound here. All right, I think that sounds good. So I want to welcome everyone to the Southeast Heights. We're up around Zuni and Valencia, and we're actually in front of the gun violence memorial mural that we have here in the city of Albuquerque. And also at my old cleaners, back when I used to live up here, so good to see they're doing okay. But in any event, we're also across from the CARE campus, which we always like to highlight as one of our, right now, all too few areas where you can actually get things like behavioral health treatment, and that's exactly the kind of thing we're trying to expand over to the Gateway Center. But today we want to talk about gun violence. And you know, our community is undergoing a scourge of gun violence. We know this all around us, and it's grown even more severe since the pandemic. And gun violence has been a challenge in Albuquerque actually for decades. But the fact that it continues to get worse means that we've got to do everything in our power to try and turn it around. And this extends from whether it's folks walking down the street to dropping off our kids at school. We see the usage of a firearm that leads to the loss of life. And that's something that we have to refocus on, especially going into our upcoming legislative session. Now, there's factors that drive people to gun violence, but they're complex factors. They involve, so to deal with gun violence, we also have to deal with the root causes behind it. And those can be a lot of things. Communities caught up in the cycle of fear, even for their own protection, and the trauma that can lead to more violence when it comes to retribution. And that's why we have our violence intervention program that Jerry Bachicha heads up here. And it's really trying to disrupt that cycle of gun violence. But we've also got to look at how a gun plays out in terms of the criminal justice system, and how the usage of a weapon can also trigger different aspects to stop the revolving door. And so that's part of what we're looking at going forward as well. But what we're announcing today is our gun violence task force for the city of Albuquerque. And our CAO, Sarita Nair, is going to talk more about that. But we're officially declaring that through executive order, and we're going to make sure that they come up with answers as we continue to create policies, not only at the city and county level, but also going into the legislative session. Part of this also means understanding that gun violence does tend to follow a public health model. It does have to do with relationships between people, and then when you add a gun in the mix, that's when it becomes deadly. It could be domestic violence situations, or it could be related to drug trade, or it could be related to just personal safety. But we have to understand that this also involves individual relationships, and that's why that public health model is so important. Now, this came about as one of the recommendations from our Metro Crime Initiative. So recall this summer we convened the Attorney General, the District Attorney, State Chief of Police, area legislators, and of course our Albuquerque Police Department. We came up with 40 recommendations going forward to literally make this city safer. And one of them is that we have to go into more policies that will try and prevent gun violence. And so it's similar to what we did with domestic violence, which of course becomes deadly when there's a weapon involved. And so now we're going to convene our gun violence task force. And so to many of our friends and our kids and our family members, there is a message here that we want to make sure that you know that we are taking the fact that there are too many guns on our streets and in the hands of children very seriously going forward. And we're going to try and hold the rest of the state accountable to help us with that initiative as well. So we hope this is now the beginning of one of our Metro Crime Initiative actions that is going to create urgent steps forward to keep our city safer for future generations. So with more on this, let's hear from our CAO, Sarita Nair.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, everybody, for coming out today. You know, folks might be wondering, why a task force that feels like it's people talking rather than action, but we've actually learned very much the opposite lesson in the past few months. We have really learned the power of convening people with both lived experience and professional experience, and how that can lead to really effective solutions. Mayor Keller mentioned the Mayor's Domestic Violence Task Force, which he convened about a year and a half ago. they really provided us with the most concrete, achievable, measurable set of recommendations that I think we've ever gotten from any task force in history, and that was thanks to all of the folks who participated, and Tori Jacobus from our Office of Civil Rights. And so when we heard about this idea of putting together a gun violence task force, we're really believers in the ability of coming up with new ideas and really focusing on things that work, and sometimes even stopping things that don't work, and how important that can be for city policy. So one of the key pieces of making a task force successful is getting the right people to the table. So this task force will be made up of 10 to 15 different representatives from across the spectrum of government, law enforcement, providers, and community members, people from community organizations, CYFD, Bernalillo County that operates the CARE campus across the street, City Council and their staff, and of course from within the city, the Albuquerque Community Safety Department, the Family Community Services Department, APD, and then from the state, Adult Probation and Parole, and as always, our Office of Equity and Inclusion. We'll have members of the general public, and we will specifically have individuals who are directly impacted by gun violence, because we know how important it is to have lived experience at the table. We also will have administrative support from our violence intervention program, and Mayor mentioned Jerry Bachicha, the director of that program, is here with us today to answer any questions. But it's really part of their vision for making sure that violence intervention is successful in our city, and then also making sure that the pieces of prevention and enforcement that come before and after intervention are also successful. We're really just trying to focus on this tough challenge and move forward. And I would also note that through our Metro Crime Initiative, another recommendation was forming an Office of Violence Prevention at the state level. That's something we very much support and hope that the legislature will move forward in this session. It's something we desperately need as a state to understand how gun violence impacts us in all the different ways, from suicide to accidental deaths to, of course, shootings and murders. So thank you for all being here, and I'll turn this over to Chief Medina.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Gun violence is, driving the increase in violent crime within the city of Albuquerque. The fact is, crime is down within the city of Albuquerque, but violent crime is up, and gun violence is the #1 factor in that increase. Nationally, 77% of homicides involve a firearm. In Albuquerque, 20%. In 2020, 71% of homicides involved a firearm. And in 2021, so far, 77% of homicides involve a firearm. Shooting with injuries over the past 2 years, we've averaged 25 shootings with injuries. And basically that means where a bullet struck an individual. Males represent 85% of our victims, and most victims are young adults, in their 20s and in their 30s. At APD, we have made gun violence a priority. We started tracking last year every single shooting. We want to know what the demographics are. We want to know what types of shootings, how they're broken up into different parts of the city. We also have our commanders meet daily. Each day they start their day with a recap of the shootings for the past 24 hours so that we could look to see if there's anything we could do to prevent either follow-up or dedicate resources to those areas that are in need. We have a gun violence reduction unit that was created under this administration, that its sole goal is to investigate and dedicate their time to investigating gun incidents. We have a violence interruption program where we're trying to stop that cycle of violence and prevent a victim from either becoming an offender or being re-victimized again. We're in a good position to share data on gun violence with researchers to help us determine the programs that are working well. I'm happy that the mayor convened the Metro Crime Initiative and that we were able to get everybody to the table, because I think the one thing we need to remember is, for so long, law enforcement has been a Band-Aid. We are a Band-Aid. We go out, we arrest somebody, we put them in jail, and sometimes it's the revolving door and they're back out. But we're starting to put programs together that are stopping the cycles. And for me, this task force is going to assist us in getting to the whys and the hows we could prevent this in the long run. And this is looking at root causes, and this is something that is long overdue. And I want to thank everybody who has been instrumental and is going to be partnering with this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chief. And now I do want to introduce the co-president of New Mexicans to Prevent Gun Violence, Miranda Visconti.
So today we're here, to do some very important work on gun violence prevention. We're also here to honor this mural. This is our 10th gun violence prevention mural. It's one of the many programs that we do. I want to give a huge thank you to the 2nd Judicial District Attorney's Office. They helped fund this mural. It would not have happened without their support. These are not just murals. These are an opportunity for us to start a conversation on the issue of prevention. In fact, the majority of our murals are actually in schools, so we can get our youth talking about this issue. In addition, they also give us the opportunity to have a lasting message on gun violence prevention. As the mayor said, gun violence is a public health. We are in a public health crisis. It is filling up our hospital beds daily. It is devastating to our families and destroying our communities. But at this point, sadly, in 2021, our numbers are off the charts. We are losing one person every single day to gun violence in New Mexico. We are losing 2 children every single month to gun violence in New Mexico, and it is costing our state $1.8 billion a year. It's a multifaceted problem that demands a multi-pronged approach. And we have to do that, as the mayor said, through a public health lens and through an equity lens, because we cannot arrest our way out of this problem. If we could arrest our way out of this problem, we would have ended it quite a while ago. Obviously, that's not working. We need to take a multi-pronged approach. Now, Mayor Keller has been working on this issue way before he was the mayor of Albuquerque. He was constantly trying to find creative ways, creative solutions, so that we could prevent gun violence, and that's exactly what the Violence Intervention Project does. But one mayor cannot do it alone. One person cannot do it alone. We need to all work together as a community. We need to put our political differences aside so that we can work together on prevention long before the trigger is pulled. Thank you very much.
So I think with that, we'll take a few questions if folks have any. And I know there were some questions about the graduation, so we'll just kind of pause and do that after. But if anyone have questions on this? All set? Okay. All right, so we'll just say thank you. Miranda, great to see you down here.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah. And